Hello everyone and welcome to the Steve Skeleman YouTube channel, the official YouTube channel of I Don't Know Orcs I Guess. You can find us on Facebook and on Instagram. So today we're talking about the Reaper Pathfinder Paints. This set's coming out September 3rd, right after ReaperCon. And thanks again to Reaper and Ron in particular for sending these out to me to review in advance of their retail release. When I did my unboxing video, I didn't really talk about the cases much. I was way too excited at that point. But these are the new cases. From what I understand, they're going to be using these for all of their paint sets from here on out. The Pathfinder paints, obviously, they're also doing Bones sets as well, Bones paint sets that are going to be in these cases as well. They're a little bigger than the old case. They still hold the same amount of paints, but because they're a more rectangular shape, the old cases were kind of almost clamshell. They were a little rounded on one end. I think these will probably actually store better for most people, and they've also got a little bit of interlocking system between the bottom and the top where it's not like a hard lock like it's clicking in or anything, but it helps it stay a little stable if you're stacking a pile of them. And the little Reaper logo here is kind of neat too. So the paints themselves. As I said, on the Facebook page, I've posted stills and on Instagram all of the different colors along with their corresponding bottles, so you know what paint looks like what when it's actually on plastic. One thing the main thing to know about these paints is that they are MSP paints, and if you've used MSP paint before, Master Series paint before, then you know exactly what I mean. If not, I'll give you a brief primer. Master Series paint is translucent. Some of it's more translucent than others, but all of it kind of has a translucency to it that really lends itself to layering, which is primarily what I like to use them for. They are really, really good at layering colors. If you're looking for a Reaper paint that is a little more opaque, a little more one coverage kind of paint, then you're going to want to go with the Bones line, the Bones formulation of paint. From what I understand, the Bones formulation is basically identical to the old Reaper HD line. It's different branding, and from what they've said on the live streams, they're actually going to be taking some of the older HD colors, porting them over to the Bones line, so they still will have some use. So that being said, these are very translucent, and when I was doing my color test stick, since I was just doing this straight onto gray primer, I don't know if you can see, but there is some areas that even with 3 or 4 layers still kind of bleeding through. The base color is still kind of bleeding through a little bit, especially on that orange right there. That's normal for translucent paint. If I was putting this on a mini and I could kind of sort of curate how my colors were going to go, you'd choose a sympathetic base color. For the purposes of the paint test sticks, I simply did enough layers until I got like the raw color of the actual paint. The paints themselves come in a wide range. There's a lot of reds, there's a lot of greens, there's a lot of blues, and there's also a full spate of metals. If you were to look at this set as a standalone set, like say you didn't have any miniature paint at all, and you bought these 2 sets, you could cover an awful lot of bases. I'm not going to say it's the only paint set you're going to need, and I'm going to go over a couple things in a minute, but it covers an awful lot of bases. One thing I do like about these particular color formulations is the brights are bright without being cartoonish. That's one thing I think a lot of wargaming paints kind of, cross the line twice with. They're very, very bright and cartoonishly bright. And part of that is because the wargaming aesthetic, you want super brightly colored armies because you've got to see them from a long way away. Role-playing game purposes, I think you're generally seeing your miniatures from a slightly closer perspective, and you're also not having necessarily hundreds of units on a table at one time, so the colors don't have to be as bright. And I think sometimes when you use wargaming paints with role-playing miniatures, you kind of oversaturate the color schemes. And so what I really like about the Pathfinder paints is that they are bright, but they're not cartoonishly bright. The other thing I like is the ones that are not bright, the ones that are a little more pale, aren't dead gray pale. They've got a creaminess, a warmth to them. Honestly, some of these color swatches, if you had handed me a card from a hardware store saying this is the paint I want to paint my living room in, I wouldn't have batted an eye. They have a certain quality about them that it looks homey. Does that make sense? it doesn't look flat and dead and gray. That's what I'm trying to say. They are all matte, mind you, but it doesn't have the flatness that a sort of a grayish dead pale would have. One thing about matte that I had mentioned in my previous one that I was very happy with is the Tian Sha Jade is matte jade, and that made me very happy because I've used some other jades by some other companies and they all end up satin at best, and I really wanted something matte, and I'm actually using that for a terrain, that color for a piece of terrain I'm working on for a future review. The other two colors that really stood out to me was the Argathia red, a nice deep brownish red, and that one was very, very useful for painting things like furniture. I'm doing a terrain review, dungeon dressing review, and in working on painting pieces for that, I was painting a lot of wooden furniture, and that's just a really nice color for that. And the great thing too is you can also mix in a little bit of, with that, and I'm grabbing all the wrong colors, the Mwangi brown with the Argathia red, and get a slightly different color, and so that way, you know, not every piece of furniture is the exact same shade of brown. Which kind of sort of segues me into the minor complaints I have about this set. The paint itself is great. The selection of colors is amazing. If there's any weak points in the selection of colors is that there's not enough dark browns. There's really only the one dark brown, the Mwangi brown, and the Argathia red is a reddish brown, but that's really the only dark browns. There's some more lighter browns. There's a beige and a tan and a sienna, but there's not enough dark browns. And for me, I like having different. If I'm painting a miniature that's going to have 2 or 3 different leather features and a wooden feature, I'm going to want every single one of them a different shade of brown, within reason. I mean, if it's a belt pouch on a belt, okay, fine, same color. But if I'm dealing with like leather armor, a belt pouch, maybe another sort of satchel, and they're carrying a staff, or they've got a wooden shield, all of those should be different shades of brown in my mind. And so when I look for a paint set, an all-encompassing paint set, I'm looking for multiple shades of brown, so I don't have to mix colors, because I don't like to mix colors. That's just me. I know some people love it. It's not my bag. So looking at this as from as if this was your comprehensive all-encompassing paint set, it should have a few more browns. The other issue is the silver. There is only one silver in the metallics, the Crusader silver. It is not especially bright. It's not really dingy, although the cold iron can, you know, kind of fill in for that. But it's also not very bright, and in my mind it's easier to mix a darker silver from a brighter silver than try to lighten up a dark silver. I would have rather had a bright silver that I could then darken with the adamantine or the iron color to bring it down a notch if it needed to be a darker shade of silver. But that's really it as far as things that I feel that it's missing. And for a 56 paint set, it really covers a lot of ground. The only other issue I really had was that since I'm not a Pathfinder player, I'm not super familiar with Pathfinder lore, the names. The naming convention, it's just like, you know, going to a comic store and looking through the Citadel paints. All the Citadel paints have names based off of Warhammer lore. All of these paints are named after Pathfinder lore, and that's awesome if you're familiar with the lore. If you're not, then the name doesn't really mean anything to you. So as someone who paints for Dungeons and Dragons, these are wonderful paints. But the names themselves, it's just like Warhammer names. That's like you could call it anything you want to call it. The particular name they gave it is not making an impression upon me, except the Hobgoblin blue. From this I did learn that Pathfinder Hobgoblins are blue. What else do you want me to say? It's good paint. I mean, it's going to come out September 3rd. A price has not been announced at this point, and I also do not know at this point if they're going to be available as individual paints or if they're going to be only available as a set. But regardless, it's 2 really good sets of paint. There's lots and lots of great colors in here. The metallics, the rest of the metallics, really all of the metallics are excellent, and this was one of my first experiences with Reaper metallics. Oddly enough, as many Reaper paints as I already have in my collection, don't have a lot of Reaper metallics. So it was nice to have these, and all of them are nice. You know, there's a brass, there's a bronze, there's a copper, and I love that they give all of those options, because so often it's just you've got gold and you've got silver, and maybe you've got 2 or 3 versions of steel or gunmetal or whatever. It's nice to have all of those other color options available. Great set. Can't say enough good things about it. All of my complaints are either something that isn't in it that should have been in it, or it's got a funny name. And that's not really a complaint about the paint itself. That's just me personally. So again, find us on Facebook. I don't know Orcs, I guess. The link to Facebook and Instagram will be in the description. And as time goes on, I will be using these paints to paint some terrain features for future reviews and paint miniatures for future reviews. So I'm not done with them. I just wanted to get a full thoughts out there before these things hit retail, so everyone has a chance to see this and come up with your own conclusions. Maybe old Steve doesn't know what he's talking about. Take it easy.